Now, if you guys are anything like me, then there's this really childish part of you that loves to try and scare and terrify your close friends and family. Because when you do it right, on the right people, you get this really instinctual and terrified response. You get to see fear in one of its most pure forms. You get to see their fight or flight response. And there are two really interesting things about this response. The first thing is that it cannot tell the difference between a life-threatening stimulus, like a lion roaring behind us, and a non-life-threatening stimulus, like an air horn. It skips all logical thought and goes straight to worst-case scenario. The second interesting thing is that it has conditioned us to prioritize negative information. When this response was evolving, it was negative information that made the difference between life or death. When early humans were fighting for survival, it was the negative information that always pointed towards death. And there was nothing more important than survival. So early humans learned to pay very close attention to negative information, more so than positive information. And we still have that bias in us today. We still have the negativity bias. And what it feels like today, we're not as much fighting for survival. Unless it's Black Friday shopping, we're mostly good. But what it looks like when you study really hard and you get a 90 on a quiz, and that 10% that came off came from a really silly mistake, you kick yourself for it. You don't think about the 90% you got right, you think about the 10% you missed. That's our negativity bias. And I don't want to add, salt to the wound, but it gets worse. There is no shortage of negativity today. I'm not even going to talk about the news cycle. That's bad enough as it is. But even within our own personal lives, things can always go wrong. There's always the poorly timed illnesses, compounding schoolwork, losing your job, not getting that internship. Anything that can go wrong seems like it will go wrong. We don't need this bias to kick us while we're down. There's this really interesting phrase in neuroscience. Neurons that fire together, wire together. As neuropsychologist Rick Hansen puts it, passing mental states become lasting neural traits. The more time we spend processing and thinking about and responding to negative stimuli, the easier it becomes for us to do so in the future. The more connections and tools our brain has to do so in the future. But what does this mean for our humanity? What does it mean for who I am to you? I define our humanity as our innate interest in the well-being of other people. But when you guys are really stressed out, when you guys have a lot of schoolwork, when you guys have a lot of work expectations, even when you're hungry, it's not the easiest thing for me to care about another person's needs. That's where the term hangry comes from. I remember spring semester last year, I had 3 exams and 1 paper, all due on a Monday. I asked one of the professors, hey, can you move this? No, okay. I asked all the professors, can you move this exam? No. All right. So the weekend beforehand, I was studying like a madman. I was in the library for maybe 10 hours, both Saturday and Sunday. And this buddy of mine comes up to me and he asks, hey, Chris, do you want to go to this intramural basketball game I have? No. I'm busy. I don't have time for that. And it's interesting. Research is starting to show that these same symptoms, these rather less human symptoms, have been shown in people that are chronically exposed to long-term stress. They've cited symptoms of desensitization, contempt and hostility towards others, and complete apathy. Not the most human characteristics. But there's good news. I'll give you a little bit of good news. I can't give you too much, but I'll give you a little bit. We can use that same neuroscience principle, neurons that fire together, wire together. We can use that to start to level the playing field between positive and negative. Neuropsychologist Rick Hansen has this interesting way of putting it. We can use the mind to change the brain, which will in turn change the mind. By a show of hands, how many of you have ever tried to learn a new language? Nearly all of you. So you guys remember when you were first learning whatever language it was, and you were trying to create those really basic and primitive sentences, it took a lot of effort. You put a lot of time into translating each word individually and then stitching it back together in the right order. But as you did it more and more and you practiced, it became less conscious. What you were doing was you were forcing your brain to create more and more and more connections where that language was being processed and generated. And over time, it became automatic. You used your mind to change the composition and structure of your brain which in turn changed your mind. It became automatic. And we can use that to our advantage to level this playing field. The middle of my freshman year was a really difficult time for me. I was so focused on schoolwork that I was not creating the amount of time I needed to socialize and make friends. I was struggling. And around the same time, I was dealing with my first ever breakup. I was dealing with really strong feelings of loneliness and negativity. And so I came up with a couple methods that I'm going to share with you guys that helped me prioritize positive information more and more and more gradually. First method, first thing I want you to do all throughout the day, I do this every day. Anytime something good happens to you, I want you to stay in that moment just a little bit longer. Let yourself feel that sweet serotonin and dopamine. All too often, when something bad happens to us, we let it sink in. We let it get to us. But when something good happens, whatever. Don't do that. You can train yourself not to do that. And as you keep doing that, and more good things keep happening, you don't have to take that moment. You just feel it automatically. So throughout the day, it doesn't matter how dumb the good thing is. If you had a really good BLT, feel it. It is fine. So that's the first method. You can do that all throughout the day. The second method, I call it the 1, 2, 3 method. First thing I want you to do, I want you to take a deep breath. Before I came down on stage and I was standing up there, I could feel my heart beating. I took 2 deep breaths, and I could still feel it, but less so. It's like hitting a reset button. It feels fantastic. Give yourself that time. Acknowledge that nothing can hurt you. The second thing I want you to do, I want you to think of the 2 best things that happened to you that day. I typically do this when I go to bed, when I lie down, and it only takes about a minute or 2. Think of the 2 best things, or just 2 good things that happened to you that day. Again, BLT. Oh, doesn't matter. Anything. What you're doing when you're bringing it back up is you're reinforcing and recreating those connections. You're augmenting that positive experience. The last thing I want you to do, I want you to think of 3 people that you know care about you. I want you to think of 3 people that you care about as well. I want you to think of ways that they have showed you that they care about you, and think of ways that you can show them that you care about them. What you're doing is you're creating these connections in your head that are responsible for the compassion you feel for other people. They're responsible for your human behaviors. And by thinking of them and repeating that every night over and over, you are slowly strengthening that part of your brain that processes good news. Now, before I go, I have 2 sort of disclaimers. First thing, I am not a trained professional. This should not be your primary care. If you are feeling, yeah, it's pretty obvious. If you are feeling really strong and chronic negative emotions, I urge you to please see a trained professional. At best, this can be a supplement, but don't let it be your first choice. Second thing is that I'm really not trying to convert you guys, this sort of like hippie, good vibes only sort of thing. That's not the point. Even though I've spent almost 10 minutes ragging on negative information, it does serve a purpose. That negativity bias is the reason we learn so well from our mistakes. That negativity bias is the reason we're capable of compassion at all, because our failures make us all the more capable of compassion to other people. The problem is that the fulcrum, it's not even. Negativity by far outweighs positivity. Research has shown that negative information is processed about 5 times stronger than positive information. And that sucks. By acknowledging that we have this negativity bias and taking the proper steps to level the playing field and giving yourself those neural resources, the struggle to remain human doesn't have to be a battle that we lose all the time. It can become a winnable battle, and we can live far more happy and human lives. Thank you.